The following is intended for mature audiences. Welcome back to Hell, everyone. We're gonna just jump right into it with this dating horror story I received. Hey Ralph, I've been sitting with a really weird thing. And I've been sitting with it because I think maybe I might have dodged a very dangerous situation. I wanted to share this with you to see if you or your listeners could possibly help me make sense of it. So I met up with this guy who I chatted a little with. He was good looking from what he sent on the app, kind of formal in the way he texted, but whatever, I'm attracted to that. We then set up to meet at this bar. When I got there, I couldn't find him, so I messaged him. He told me he was in the back. The first red flag, I was catfished. This guy looked nothing like the photo on the app. I'm talking using a whole different identity. He was sitting at a table in the back, just staring. The second I sat, I noticed how distracted he looked. I wanted to leave, but wanted to also keep my cool. We start to talk. I definitely don't order a drink. He doesn't either. Actually, he barely even moved, just kept watching me once I sat down. Dude, his pupils were huge, and I just remember seeing his chin jitter. He also kept fidgeting with something in his coat. His questions were weird too. He asked what scared me, if I believed in psychics, if I ever felt like following or watching someone. Then he reached out and touched my wrist. Then asks, "Does anyone know you're here?" I laughed because I thought he was joking. You know when something so outrageous happens, you can't believe it's real, so you just laugh it off? I then followed up and asked him if he was okay. And then he responded with, "I just want to open." And I didn't catch that last part. What did he want to open exactly? At this point, it was time to go. I stayed calm, then mentioned I had to pee, so I went to the bathroom just to get a minute to breathe and planned to sneak out. And I swear I was only gone for a minute because when I got out, I looked toward the table and he was gone. I left pretty quickly after that, but luckily I ran into one of my friends on the way out who was with the group and they walked me to my car. On my drive home, I kid you not, I came to a stoplight not far from the bar, and standing at the crosswalk intersection was this guy. And he wasn't waiting to cross the street either, but was just staring straight up at the sky. I never wanted to run a red light so fast, but luckily it changed pretty quickly. I get home, I check the app to go and block him, but his profile is gone. I'm thinking he beat me to it. Welcome to a world where buzzworthy topics, paranormal tales, horror, true crime, and listener-submitted experiences blend into a realm of the unknown. My name is Ralph Anthony, and welcome to the Scream Society podcast. Hello, Screamers. Happy 2025. And yes, I'm fully aware that you are supposed to stop wishing a Happy New Year to people after the first week of January. However, I've been MIA since December. And we've started off with a bit of a bang over here because I came into 2025, all moved into a new city with some drama, with about 5 less friends and family members. I mean, it is the year of the snake. But I also came into 2025 ready to take this podcast and my content to new heights. It's time. If you're a returning listener, welcome back and thank you for continuing to be here for what has been my passion. If you're new here, welcome. And just to catch you up to speed on everything, I cover a wide range of topics with a hot topic segment that I call Sinister Subjects. You'll get everything from pop culture, paranormal, true crime even, and yes, horror. I also love incorporating your stories and answering your questions about whatever. So don't be shy. Stick around to the end to find out how to connect and where to send your experiences. So for the first time this year, let's get into Sinister Subjects. Gosh, I miss saying that. Let's ease into this. horror community. Actually, more specifically, Scream community. What exactly has been going on with the casting of the upcoming 2026 sequel, Scream 7? And I've been dying to talk about this. And before we get into the very positive side of things, we're going to descend a little into the not so good news first. Now, I feel these past 3 years have been this roller coaster of highs and lows for this iconic franchise, and I've griped about this before, but it's getting to that point again. After this film releases, I need Paramount and Spyglass Studios to let Scream rest just for a little bit. And I say that as a die-hard, ride or die stan of this franchise. I mean, have you seen my recording space? Hello. So, I discussed a few episodes back that Neve Campbell was returning along with Courtney Cox, obviously Roger L. Jackson, and already, just with those announcements, it felt like the film was taking a turn for the better. Roger and two iconic divas returning, sign me up. Then a handful of newcomers to the franchise were announced. McKenna Grace, Asa Gurman, Isabel May, Sam Rickner, Celeste O'Connor, and a few others were announced. Okay, great. I'm open to it. Then Mason Gooding gets announced, and in my opinion, is one of the most beautiful human beings on the planet. So all these announcements just felt like wins. The news died off a little over the holidays. Then January hits. New year, fans are on the edge of their seats just waiting for more announcements. More specific, if Patrick Dempsey will finally be announced as Sydney's husband, Mark Kincaid. And fans assumed this because of his role in Scream 3 and how the characters of Mark and Sydney had this chemistry in that film. He also survived that film. Well, filming began on January 7th and there was still no announcement. Then January 16th comes around and one of my buddies sends me this article from Deadline, I believe it was, with a headline, Joel McHale joins Scream 7 as Sidney Prescott's husband, Mark Evans. Excuse me? Who? And I'm sitting there with the dumbest expression on my face because I am gagged. Like, it doesn't even make sense at this point. Radio Silence, the team behind the previous two films, even confirmed Patrick Dempsey's Mark Kincaid was Sydney's husband mentioned in Scream 5. So now I'm assuming there was again some form of a pay dispute between the studio and Patrick Dempsey, or maybe a scheduling conflict. And the sad part is that the same day, Jasmine Savoy Brown was announced to return as Mindy, which was unfortunately overshadowed by this other bombshell. And no hate to Joel McHale. I used to enjoy watching The Soup on E. Remember that show? I'm really just curious and nervous to see how this plays out. And side note, reading the comments on some of the articles announcing Joel McHale, some people really want it to be 1930 so bad, talking about Patrick Dempsey's too old. And I know some folks want to go back to a lot of regressive things. Ageism isn't going to be one of those. Here's the thing, and I heard a number of my fellow horror commentators touching on this point. Again, no hate to Joel McHale, but I think he may be the opening kill, or at least an early kill. That's just my theory. I'm locking it in. That's my final answer. And not to sound like a bitter Betty, I think and not even just myself actually, so many of us, I think I've just had these expectations and were thrown this curveball. So it was kind of hard to process that news, but I'm keeping an open mind. Super fans, OGs, let's try to keep an open mind here. This year has already started off with enough negativity, and more specifically, this sequel, this franchise has dealt with enough negativity. Moving on to a more positive note here, I am, however, looking forward to Mark Consuelos joining the franchise as Gale Weathers' rival. Allegedly, that'll be fun. And I think most importantly, the sexiest ghost-faced and only solo killer in the entire franchise, Scott Foley, who played Sidney's brother Roman in Scream 3, will be returning. And lastly, actually second to lastly, this is one I cannot wait to see what they do with. Matthew Lillard will return to Scream 7. Stu is alive. I'm kidding. Kidding. I've stayed neutral about that whole theory because Sidney did drop a TV on his head in the original. But yeah, so Matthew Lillard was announced, and now there's even rumors that Emma Roberts from Scream 4 will soon join the cast. And there's a theory going around, and I really hope it's not true, but there's a theory that the reason why they're bringing all of these past killers who have died back is because they're going to incorporate some form of AI to mess with Sidney further. And not saying that that's not a good concept, but not AI, not in a Scream film. Like, Scream doesn't need AI. It's gonna date the film, I feel, and it'll probably have about as big of an impact as the voice changer technology from Scream 3, which didn't really take the franchise to new heights. I don't know. But speaking of kills, actually, I was asked a few times over the break about what I expect from Scream 7, and I had to think about it for some time, especially now that we have all of these cast announcements. As far as legacy characters go, I'm gonna need Sidney and Gale to be left alone here. The passing of the torch flopped with 5 and 6. They can stay. I want to feel like the stakes are high, and I don't want plot armor on these characters. But again, Sidney does not need to die. Nev herself has stated in a past interview that Sidney dying would be sending the wrong message. Gale either needs to be left alone or taken out. And as my favorite character, I don't want this, but we can't have another Scream 6. One of, if not both, of the Meeks twins needs to go. Again, the previous 2 films felt like providing plot armor to these characters was a route to take, and in my opinion, left a lot of the best scenes from 6 feeling pointless. The train sequence and the double synced knife wipe from both ghost faces after they stab Chad would have been so badass had those characters stayed dead. I don't want another random family member or super fan to be the killer or killers. I don't necessarily want Stu to be alive, but if so, I really hope for some sort of cult storyline. It's time, baby. It's time. Roman, I don't need him to be a vision in somebody's mind. We'll leave that to Sam and Billy. And most important to me, I need Roger L. Jackson to bring the energy he brought from Scream 4. Because does anyone else feel like those Ghostface calls were the most menacing and scary in the franchise, aside from the first film's opening call? Or is it just me? I guess all will be revealed when the film hits theaters in a little over a year from now on February 27th, 2026. And I'm almost done with this, I promise. But 2026 is racking up to be a great year in cinema, apparently. The Wayans brothers just announced Scary Movie 6's release date, which is June 12th, 2026. And I'm really loving this horror / slasher renaissance that we're in. There's a lot to look forward to. And this year alone, Heart Eyes, The Monkey, Final Destination 6, I Know What You Did Last Summer, the horror slasher crazy fanatic is ready to go feral at the movie theater. Moving on here to some actual real life news. So remember when everyone was talking about a ban on a certain app a majority of Americans use called TikTok? Ever heard of that little app? Los Angeles is literally on fire. People are being deported. Eggs are $10 a dozen, but the true horror and panic came from this ban. Well, that ban happened on January 19th, 2025, but it only lasted for about 12 hours. So to grasp the full picture here, we have to go back to the year 2020. During Trump's first presidency, there was this whole drama about about banning TikTok in the US, it began there. The government was worried about national security because TikTok is owned by a Chinese company called ByteDance. Shout out ByteDance for allowing me to produce the first 14 episodes of this season and this episode. So the government thought the app might be sharing Americans' data with the Chinese government, and it was a big deal because it wasn't just about TikTok. It was part of the bigger tension between the US and China over tech and security. Now, Trump signed some executive orders that were basically like, TikTok has to sell its US operations to an American company or it'll be banned. I'm trying to make it easier to understand here. Companies like Microsoft and Oracle jumped in, and there was almost a deal where Oracle and Walmart would take over TikTok's US side, but it never really went anywhere because of court battles and delays. Now, TikTok even sued the government saying the orders weren't fair and went against the law, and courts blocked the ban from happening. So when Biden took office in 2021, he stopped pushing for a straight-up ban, but said they'd still investigate apps linked to foreign countries, including TikTok. So while TikTok didn't get banned, it was still being looked into, and the concerns about data privacy didn't go away. And as I said earlier, on January 19th of this year, it actually got banned nationwide. The Supreme Court backed the ban, so the app technically became unavailable across the country. And for some of us, mostly for people on Pacific Standard Time, the ban hit at 7 p.m. on January 18th. I was at dinner and we all opened the app and got that infamous message. But then, right after the ban went into effect, Trump issued an executive order on the first day of his new presidential term, giving it a 75-day extension. So the enforcement is on pause for now. So opening the app back up, users received yet another message from TikTok, which basically thanked Trump for pretty much saving the app. However, companies like Apple and Google had already pulled TikTok from their app stores, so people can't download it or get updates anymore. Meanwhile, talks about someone buying TikTok's US operations have started back up. Microsoft's name has come up again as a potential buyer. There's also this proposal from Perplexity AI to merge with TikTok, where the US government would end up owning up to half of the company after it goes public. It's supposed to be a way to deal with security concerns while keeping TikTok running in the US. So for now, people who already had the TikTok app can still use it, but no one can download it or update it anymore. So if you deleted the app before the fake ban, did I say fake? If you deleted the app prior, you can't re-download it until further notice. So the app's future is pretty up in the air with all these legal and business moves happening. And here's the thing. This whole situation is pretty sus. It was a stunt for TikTok to go down for a few hours so the US could get its grimy little hands in the pot and control yet another form of information the people, you and I, hello, have access to. Because TikTok, and I've had my issues with it, but TikTok has been a huge resource for world news that mainstream media doesn't push, news that actual people are delivering in real time. Does the app have individuals on there who fearmonger, who spread misinformation? Absolutely, which is why it is so important and why I always say and always will say to stay curious and actually do the research. But at the same time, there's a number of genuine people on there sharing factual news. So after the app was relaunched after about 12 hours, and for those who kept it on their phones, the algorithms were a little off, and there were a number of Meta, owned by Mark Zuckerberg, ads. People also noticed you can now sync Facebook with TikTok, which we've never been able to do before. Again, leading us to believe that this was the plan all along. Not even to just get the US more control over what people are seeing, but to give Trump this savior of TikTok crown on his first day in office, which was the day after the ban. And I did try that trick where users were saying to block Meta on TikTok and your algorithm will return to normal or something to an extent. Now, honestly, I didn't experience this. My feed is the same. After blocking Meta, I did stop seeing ads for Instagram and Facebook, but everything else is pretty much the same. And another thing, before moving on from this, ByteDance, y'all are some shady girls. Because remember when I mentioned earlier how I use a software under ByteDance, the owners of TikTok? Well, if you create content, you've heard of the app CapCut. Everyone uses it, and I use the desktop version to produce and edit these episodes. So late last year, they brought up a price increase. Okay, fine. Every subscription platform is doing that. I get it. But they said if you continue your subscription, you don't cancel, your current rate will stay the same. Basically, you'll be grandfathered in. Only new subscribers will have to pay the new rate. So this banned all apps owned by ByteDance, right? So I thought, I'm going to just leave my subscription alone. I'm not going to stop. I'll write out this ban. No, I was unsubscribed. And when I try to renew it, I get the new price, which has doubled. So if you notice future episodes sound a little different, it's because I'm shopping around for alternative softwares. I've got a question for you all. Have you seen that movie, Ma, with Octavia Spencer, who is brilliant? It's basically about this woman of a particular age who befriends a group of teenagers and provides alcohol and parties with them. If you haven't seen it, just think of Ash Trevino from TikTok. And that's what immediately came to mind when I came across this Florida elementary school principal story. And trigger warning, it does involve minors. So Elizabeth Hill Brodigan, a 47-year-old principal of Roosevelt Elementary School in Cocoa Beach, was arrested on the very infamous date, January 19th, after police were called to her home for a rowdy house party. And when officers arrived, they found over 100 kids dressed in matching t-shirts, drinking alcohol that was freely available in coolers throughout the house. And this chaos reached a horrifying level when one child, suffering from what police called an alcohol-related medical event, collapsed on the front lawn. It was reported the child was so heavily intoxicated that Brevard County Fire Rescue had to be called. Adding to the absurdity, Elizabeth was spotted in her driveway turning off her outdoor lights in what seemed like an attempt to make the house look empty, completely ignoring the fact that a child was unconscious on her front lawn. This move forced the rescue team to rely on their vehicle lights to treat the child. And it doesn't stop there, because police arrested another child for DUI near Elizabeth's home. It gets worse. An intoxicated teacher from the same school, 31-year-old Carly Anderson, approached officers and admitted she'd also been at the party. These are the type of people running our schools, teaching children, and they couldn't comprehend that maybe a house party with minors endangering children was not the best decision. Maybe we could have had a pizza party. The good news here is that both women were arrested and now faced felony charges of child neglect and misdemeanor charges for contributing to the delinquency of minors. Elizabeth was also hit with a misdemeanor charge for hosting an open house party. Authorities ended up questioning a number of kids and parents after the fact, and according to reports, the party was advertised on Snapchat and hosted by Elizabeth's two sons. An officer who showed up at the scene called Elizabeth about it, and then she told them that she was down the street but would head back home to handle it. Now, reports also claim students told police that everyone pretty much knew she was the principal and that these kinds of parties happened once or twice a month. They claimed she didn't do anything to stop it and seemed fine with what was going on. Some students even said people were smoking weed at the party, and a guy in a mask was recording videos while pointing a gun at whoever was filming. There was one report stating that Elizabeth was actually in the house at one point. She told her son to shut the party down, but when he didn't listen, she didn't do anything else and just gave up. And maybe I just need to be a parent to see how I would react. But is it just me, or does it seem like children and teens today tend to override parental authority? Just a question. Now, in a statement to local news, Brevard Public Schools confirmed that both women have been placed on administrative leave pending the results of the investigation. Like, one really needs to be conducted, right? And ironically, Elizabeth's bio on the school website paints a picture of a devoted educator boasting about her 23 years of service and even highlighting that she'd been awarded Teacher of the Year. It's hard to imagine how someone who's spent decades shaping young minds thought that hosting or letting her kids host a party like this was remotely acceptable. I do read your comments and messages, the non-submission ones too, and a lot of you have asked me to cover more extraterrestrial topics, UFOs, flying objects, orbs in the sky, right? Which, quick side story here. On the day I moved, I had about a 2.5-hour drive to my new place. There's a stretch of road where it's all hills and open space. And at one point to my left, I saw what looked like a glowing red fireball. Not a comet, not a shooting star. I've seen those before, but this bright red orb with a trail behind it. And the trail eventually disappears, but the orb itself just hovered there, glowing. It was the strangest thing. And what was strange was how it moved, or rather how it didn't move. It wasn't falling. It wasn't rising. It was just there. And then at some point it was gone. I didn't actually see it disappear because I had to focus on the road. But when I glanced back, it had vanished. And here's the kicker. This happened in the same area where my dad, hey dad, once saw a hovering, lit up Ferris wheel looking object over a barn. And no, it wasn't a New Jersey drone. And to be honest, I've been dying to cover this topic over the holiday break. And let's just start by addressing something. I think we need to stop calling them New Jersey drones. The first major reports might have come from there, but these sightings are happening everywhere, across multiple countries, all over the world. I follow community groups where local people from my previous city share things, and some of them have shared interesting photos. So calling them New Jersey drones makes it sound like some isolated incident when it's clearly a global phenomenon. I know I'm going to sound like a crazy conspiracy theorist, but isn't that why we're here? To talk about everything? Now, let's talk about the word drones. I get that some of these objects might technically fit that definition, but in recent years, there's been a shift in how we talk about them. We went from calling them UFOs to UAPs, and now it's just drones. And honestly, the sheer number of UFO sightings happening right now is quite concerning. This isn't just a fringe topic anymore. It's part of everyone's reality, whether we want to believe it or not. Let's break it down. In late 2024, there were numerous drone sightings across New Jersey and neighboring states, sparking public concern and speculation. These objects were seen flying over residential areas, critical infrastructure, and even military installations. Now, over 5,000 reports were filed, prompting the FAA to impose temporary flight restrictions in certain areas. And yet, the government's response? We don't know what they are, but they're not a threat. Clearly, there's a mix of things happening here. And let's be very clear. Believing in UFOs doesn't mean you automatically believe in aliens. It just means acknowledging that people are seeing flying objects that haven't been identified. It's not that hard. And personally, though, I think there's something non-human involved because, let's be real, crazier things have happened. This phenomenon isn't new. It's been around since the beginning of recorded history. Ancient art across different cultures has depicted orbs and disc-shaped aircraft for thousands of years, and whether people like it or not, the religious community is going to come for me. There are even alleged UFOs behind Jesus in Renaissance paintings. So there's always been something going on, right? Remember that Snooki from Jersey Shore case I covered earlier this season? Different cultures have interpreted these sightings in different ways, but whatever they are, aliens, interdimensional beings, insect people, I'm kidding about that one, who knows, honestly, if the US government has actually made direct contact with these beings and entered into some kind of agreement with them, that's a huge deal. And some credible people have claimed that's exactly what's happened, allegedly. Remember that frantic former Area 51 employee who called into Art Bell's Coast to Coast AM? I always bring that up because it's one of the most fascinating and chilling moments in American radio history. And then there's Phil Schneider, a former government contractor who claimed he worked on secret underground military bases and had first-hand encounters with extraterrestrials. He alleged that in 1979, while working at the Dulce base in New Mexico, he was involved in a deadly firefight between humans and aliens. He also spoke about government cover-ups, black budget projects, and alleged secret collaborations with extraterrestrials. And just to go back, black budget projects are secret government programs that are funded through undisclosed allocations, and they often involve advanced military tech, intelligence operations, and covert research. Schneider eventually died suddenly in 1996. The official cause? Suicide. But many people believe that he was silenced for exposing and talking too much. So, yeah, of course the government has a vested interest in keeping this quiet. I mean, let's be real. The government lies about everything. TikTok, hello. They even told us at one point that aliens weren't real. Then they admitted something was going on. So, what are we supposed to believe here? And maybe these beings aren't from some distant universe. Maybe they've always been here with us, just out of our sight. I mean, there is so much of our world we barely understand, we have barely seen, especially the deep ocean, Antarctica, which I need to do a deep dive on that. Who really knows what else might be here with us? And if you've been paying attention, you'll notice that an enormous amount of money has been funneled into secret programs studying this technology. This isn't just speculation anymore. A lot of this research has ended up in the hands of major private contractors. So, yeah, I think we're seeing a mix of things in the sky, some human, some not so human. A lot of footage shows regular aircraft literally following these strange orbs, which raises the question, why are military helicopters chasing something that's supposedly just drones? And we can't forget, there's been an entire infrastructure in place to spread misinformation about all of this. Some parts of the government are being forced to acknowledge it now because of congressional hearings, but at the same time, half the people who testify are getting threatened behind the scenes. So If you're just now diving into this topic, I get why it feels overwhelming, but in my opinion, this isn't just a conspiracy anymore. It's a lot. It's a lot to keep up with, and I do get why people are skeptical. Now, on January 28th, 2025, White House Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt addressed the drone fiasco. Take a listen.
I do have news directly from the President of the United States that was just shared with me in the Oval Office from President Trump directly, an update on the New Jersey drones. After research and study, the drones that were flying over New Jersey in large numbers were authorized to be flown by the FAA for research and various other reasons. Many of these drones were also hobbyists, recreational, and private individuals that enjoy flying drones. In time, it got worse due to curiosity. This was not the enemy.
Well, even with that explanation, there are still a lot of unanswered questions, like what exactly they were researching and why these drones were flying near sensitive areas. It's just another vague and misleading explanation. But to wrap this up, look, you don't have to trust the government, but maybe trust the people who are out here actually talking about this, because some of them have risked everything to get this information out. And that, to me, says a lot. Let's move on to probably my favorite segment, where I get to choose any random true crime or paranormal case that I find compelling and creepy. Let's get into Terrifying But True. When the unthinkable becomes reality, we find ourselves questioning everything, as some stories are too terrifying but true. Imagine signing up for a game show to find your perfect match. You ask a few flirty questions, make your pick, and just when you think you've found the one, they turn out to be completely off-putting, unsettling, and downright creepy. Would you still go on the date, or would you run for the hills? Because that's exactly what happened to Cheryl Bradshaw when she appeared on The Dating Game back in 1978. And her chosen bachelor, Rodney James Alcala. More terrifying was what she and the producers didn't know, was that he was in the middle of a brutal killing spree. Rodney, later dubbed the Dating Game Killer, was one of the most manipulative and sadistic serial killers in American history. And the wildest part, he was literally on national television while actively murdering women. But before we get into that, let's go back to where it all started. Rodney's crimes go way back to the late 60s. His first known attack was in 1968 when he kidnapped 8-year-old Tali Shapiro outside of the Chateau Marmont in Los Angeles, where she was staying with her family. A witness saw him lure her into his car, and thankfully, they called the police. Soon after, officers tracked down and arrived at Rodney's apartment. They found Tali in a pool of blood, raped, beaten with a steel bar, and barely clinging to life. She ended up in a coma for 32 days and took months to recover. But somehow, Rodney managed to escape before the cops could arrive at the scene. He fled to the East Coast, changed his name to John Berger, and get this, enrolled at NYU Film School, studying under Roman Polanski. Yes, that Roman Polanski. And while he was in New York, he just kept killing. Authorities now believe that in 1971, Rodney raped and murdered 23-year-old flight attendant Cornelia Crilly, strangling her with her own stockings in her apartment. But at that time, no one had connected him to the crime. It wasn't until 2011, 40 years later, that he was officially linked to that case. Now, that same year, 1971, while still living under his fake name, Rodney somehow landed a job as a children's camp counselor in New Hampshire. And you'd think someone on the FBI's most wanted list would lay low, but no. He went right back to working around kids. Now, luckily, 2 campers recognized his face on a most wanted poster at the post office, and that led to his arrest and extradition back to California in August 1971. But here's where things get frustrating, because by then, Tali Shapiro's family had moved to Mexico, and they didn't want her to testify in court. They wanted to protect her from the trauma of reliving what happened. I mean, she was still just a child, and since she was the key witness, prosecutors couldn't charge Rodney with rape and attempted murder, but instead, they had to settle for convicting him on child molestation charges. He was sentenced to just 3 years, but he was paroled after serving just 34 months. Now, just 2 months after getting out, Rodney was arrested again, this time for assaulting 13-year-old Julie J., who thought she was just getting a ride to school. And yet, he was released again in 1977 after serving only 2 years. Then, because things couldn't get more absurd, his parole officer made the baffling decision to let him, a known flight risk and repeat offender, travel to New York. A week after arriving in Manhattan, Rodney is now believed to have murdered 23-year-old Ellen Jane Hover, a socialite whose godparents were Dean Martin and Sammy Davis Jr. Her date book showed she had an appointment that day with none other than Rodney, or in this case, his alias John Berger. Later that year, the FBI got a tip about Rodney's past arrest in New Hampshire. When questioned, he admitted to knowing Hover, but since her body hadn't been found yet, there wasn't enough evidence to hold him. It wasn't until 1978, a full year later, that her remains were discovered, buried under heavy rocks near the Rockefeller estate. By the late 70s, Rodney was back in California, working as a photographer and using his charm to lure women into posing for him. Some were aspiring models, others were just in the wrong place at the wrong time. And he didn't just kill. He toyed with his victims. He would strangle them until they lost consciousness, would let them wake up, and then would do it again. He liked watching them suffer. Then, after they had died, he would move their bodies in various different poses. Now, in the middle of this horrific killing spree, this is when he appeared on The Dating Game. The host, Jim Lang, introduced him as a successful photographer who enjoyed skydiving and motorcycling. Fellow contestant Jed Mills later said Rodney was a very strange guy with bizarre opinions. And somehow, Rodney won the episode. And luckily, Cheryl Bradshaw, the Bachelorette, got a bad feeling about him and backed out of the date. She described him as nothing other than creepy. That decision had probably saved her life. What a heavy feeling to know you potentially avoided being murdered. Well, the rejection didn't stop him, because Rodney kept killing. By 1979, he abducted and murdered 12-year-old Robin Samso in Huntington Beach, California. But this time, a police sketch of the suspect was released to the public, and guess who recognized him this time? His parole officer. Yes, the same one who let him travel to New York. When police searched a Seattle storage locker linked to Rodney, they found hundreds of photographs of unidentified women, children, and even men. Among them was a pair of earrings that belonged to Robin Samso. Rodney's only known connection to Seattle was through a female acquaintance whose name and address he used without her knowledge to rent the storage unit. She said that she had not had any contact with Rodney in more than 2 years and had been camping when Rodney rented the storage unit in July of 1979. So Rodney was apprehended and taken to trial, where he was convicted and sentenced to death in 1980. But thanks to legal loopholes, his conviction was overturned twice. So it wasn't until 2010 that he was finally convicted again, this time for 5 murders in California. He was later linked to 2 more in New York, and authorities believed there are many more victims out there. During his 2010 trial, Rodney whoever the manipulator represented himself. He even cross-examined witnesses, including the mother of one of his victims. He played mind games, he argued ridiculous points, and even played a clip of Alice's Restaurant by Arlo Guthrie as part of his defense. The song is considered a satirical commentary on authority. And after all of that, in 2021, Rodney died in prison at the age of 77. Now, it's not entirely clear exactly how many victims Rodney had, with only 8 confirmed. Authorities believe the number to be over 130 victims. To this day, investigators are still trying to identify people from all of those photographs that they found in that Seattle locker, and the true number of his victims may never be known. But what's truly terrifying is how many chances there were to put a stop to this. How many times was he let go? How many lives could have been saved if the justice system had just done its job? And I think Rodney's case isn't just another terrifying case, but a brutal reality of just how broken the system was, and if we're being honest, still is. And now let's dive into the newly named segment, Ralph versus the Rot, where I take on your questions and do my best to give you a fair perspective and advice, because society is decaying and I'm here to call it out. As always, if you would like me to share an experience of yours, share something you find creepy or interesting, or simply want to ask me a question, head on over to beacons.ai/The Scream Society and click on the Society submissions link. Remember, everything remains anonymous. Some of you came with fully loaded questions here. But first, I opened the episode with a listener dating horror story that also inspired me to seek out this week's terrifying but true. But just to react to the submission that I opened with, this listener shares a creepy dating app encounter. They matched with a good-looking guy, but then they met at the bar. He looked nothing like his photos. He barely spoke, fidgeted strangely, and asked pretty unsettling questions, like what scared them and if anyone knew they were there. Then he touched their wrist and mumbled something bizarre. Sensing danger, they excused himself to the bathroom, but when they came back, he was already gone. They left quickly, only to spot him later at a crosswalk, staring blankly at the sky. When they checked the app to block him, his profile had disappeared. So they basically are asking you and I, did they dodge a bullet or something even worse? I think the way you say you handled it is perfect. Honestly, you met in public, you kept your cool, and thought of a way to get out and quick based off these types of experiences. And I've gotten a large amount over these last 3 years. I'm actually shook that there aren't safer options, which after following up with this person, and for more context here, this was a gay cruising app, which usually give the option to be anonymous unless you share photos over direct message. Are there any straight apps like this? Or are y'all just about the swipe right and left life? Anyway, and you did dodge a major bullet. Not to sound extreme, but this is how people go missing. This is how people get sexually assaulted. This is how people get murdered. This guy seemed to maybe had been on some sort of drug, meth, cocaine, Molly, whatever he was on. Mixing that with the catfishing. I mean, where's Neve from MTV when you need him? But no, like mixing the catfishing with the bizarre questions and the grabbing of the wrist makes it a huge red flag. And I think you definitely got out at the right time. And I'm trying to put myself in that position and envision how I would react. Thank you for sharing. Let's get into these questions. Why were you gone for so long? I look forward to you. Well, first of all, you're sweet. But also, I was in the middle of a move and I had all my equipment packed. And I think most importantly, this little thing people experience called burnout. I was going through that, and I actually was going to keep going until the end of December, but I stopped midway. I just needed one less thing to worry about at that time. I also wasn't posting as much on social media. In fact, I've been staying off of it for most of the day. And if you live in the US, you know exactly why. But to keep this answer short, I'm back, but I will say that I will be transitioning to a semi-weekly format, which will allow me time to put more thought into episodes, also to give you longer episodes, which I know some of you prefer, but also focus on planning collaborations and just all of that fun stuff. These next two were similar, so I'm going to just combine them. How has your transition to a new city been? How do you feel being away from family and friends? And the other one asks, how are you enjoying your new place? Do you feel settled in? It's definitely been an adjustment. The biggest challenge for me has been being farther away from my dad, who I'm really close with. There was a certain comfort in knowing I could just hop in my car and be at his place in about 13 minutes. Now it's a 2.5 hour drive, which is not unbearable. I know some people live farther from their parents on opposite ends of the earth, but it's certainly different for me. And as for my friends, I don't feel too distant from them. Thanks to the beauty of modern communication, I have what feels like about 30 different group chats, all buzzing with activity. So yeah, in a way, I still feel connected to my circle despite the physical distance. But yeah, to answer the other question, I am enjoying the new place to an extent. It's starting to grow on me, but like anything in life, it's just about shifting your mindset, which admittedly is something that I sometimes resist hearing, but it's true. But that said, I've just realized I'm very much a residential kind of person. I'm used to living in a house, in a neighborhood, with the freedom to park wherever I want. That kind of lifestyle just feels natural to me. So adjusting to something different has been an interesting experience. This one asks, you believe every story people send you. I don't see my role here as a skeptic or a judge. I like to believe that I'm a storyteller, first and foremost, and whether a tale is fact or fiction isn't always the point. It's really about the experience, and I'll always stand by that because it's what we take from their experience. It's what we learn from the experience, the fear it stirs, and the connection it creates. I do love to theorize and give different perspectives after, but my place isn't to invalidate or favor one or the other or call out if it's real or not. I think my job here is just to simply share the experiences of whoever feels comfortable sharing them. I love doing that. I love spreading people's stories. I think it's interesting. How do you manage social life, self-care, work, podcasts, social media? I feel like social media sucks the life out of me. I panic and shut down. No. Although I do get to that point sometimes. I think I'm still working on that. Like I said earlier, I put social media and the podcast on the back burner when I feel my life is being sucked out of me because social media is so draining now. I miss Instagram from 2015 and below. Now it's all bullshit, especially in 2025. But aside from working out to relieve stress, I play video games. I kill some zombies for an hour. And as far as a job, I've been self-employed for 4 years, which I've been so fortunate to be able to do, to start doing things I'm passionate about. But once I start working more again, there's going to need to be another shift to find a balance, which at the end of the day, it all comes down to that balance, right? I'd say deal with what you can at the moment. Maybe you have a lot going on this month. What's more important? Okay, the podcast can miss a week. Okay, I don't need to kill zombies tonight. I wouldn't recommend putting off working out or sacrificing time with friends to be social or even time with yourself, at least for me. And not to give anyone's identity away, but this person who sent this is also a podcaster and a mother, which, hello, motherhood, the ultimate job of all. I should be asking you this question. This one's going to be short. Do you have any dating or bad hookup stories of your own? I don't have any that fit this show's format. I did have a guy reach out and ask if he could me with the ghost face mask on, but that's about it. When are we going to get a deep dive on Ash Trevino? I need the Ash Trevino craze to die. It was funny in December, but now I'm tired. If you don't know, Ash is this TikTok creator who's gotten a ton of attention, whether you'd call it fame or infamy. It's debatable. She's made a name for herself by going live, stirring up drama, and just being messy in general. But it's not the kind of attention that comes from doing anything meaningful. It's more what people call a lol cow or LOL cow, meaning she racks up views and money because people are laughing at her, not with her. And I think the kicker here is she's still making bank off of it. She first started gaining traction as the inmate hopper. Basically, she was just dating multiple prisoners, some with seriously violent pasts, and I'm talking about murder. And she would bring these men around her 2 children. She has 2 daughters, but things really took off for her when she started panhandling on TikTok live, or maybe I'm just jealous because I can't do it. Actually, I can go live now on TikTok, so I'm going to go in there and be like, you guys tap the screen, tap that screen, tap, 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 go, go, go. Yeah, so she panhandles on TikTok. She battles other big creators for money, and she has been showing way too much on camera. She just recently went viral for posting a NSFW photo on Instagram. Then there's the parting with 19 and 20-year-olds. Now, people have come for me because I have trolled her on TikTok, but honestly, I just see someone who got a taste of internet fame and spiraled, becoming reckless, irresponsible, and honestly, not someone who should have kids caught up in all of this. And honestly, it's no shock that TikTok keeps banning her. Remember when I said that you guys were sending loaded questions? Political question. Will America be great again, or America doomed? Depends how you look at it, right? And if I'm being honest, which I always am, I believe we're all entitled to our own opinions, our own beliefs. But personally, as someone who can actually grasp reality, we're heading toward the doom side of things. And I'm not trying to fearmonger because there is already enough of that. But these past few days have just been regressive. And I think this is the reason why I would come down so hard on certain creators representing the LGBTQ plus community, putting out these very extreme viewpoints, this rage bait, making these ancient folks target the community and target us harder. And if people's only reason for wanting what's happening now is they wanted cheaper food, cheaper gas, tax cuts, resources, all this shit, buckle up. Because Trump did just announce a 25% tariff on most products coming from Canada and Mexico, which that's a lot of stuff. And these tariffs kicked off on Saturday, February 1st. Now, here's the thing. Again, one of the big reasons people voted for the president, that was the top argument for most, was to escape rising costs and inflation. However, tariffs, that's just going to make things more expensive. Housing, the Canadian lumber, food, and pretty much everything else. Even pro-tariff people admit that. The Nonpartisan Tax Foundation estimates this will cost an average American household about $670 extra, and pissing off two of our biggest economic partners, which, hello, trade war, you there? Another point I don't think people fully grasp, and this one is a simple concept, thinking about not only what happens to you, but what happens to others. My dad's job has been impacted already. Yeah, he got a very unprofessional letter from this current administration we're now under, which, are we not being professional anymore? I mean, you have Elon Musk out here lottie-dying in billionaire la la land, so that should answer that. Other individuals close to me are experiencing more challenges already. And I'm being vague here because I'm not going to put their business out there like that. Now, I will say, and this may be hard to grasp, but I need you all to stop reading a headline without fully reading the entire article, then going and running with it and spreading misinformation. I think we also need to stop listening to and putting extremists at the forefront. And I'm not trying to end on a negative note here because, like I said, I've been working on mindset. I'm trying not to panic. I'm trying to be logical and level-headed and use whatever platform I have to spread awareness about what is usually overlooked. And I believe if we're checking people, we're checking everyone. I will say, before I go, I will always fight for what I believe is right and will move us forward, especially for LGBTQ plus rights. And I hope for a united future, but we have some work to do. If you want to hear a little message I did for one of my buddies' podcasts earlier this month that relates to this question, check out a Jaded Gay episode titled A Message of Hope for LGBTQ plus community. Some great words of wisdom from myself and other creators from the community. And side note, does anyone want to donate some eggs? Thank you for tuning into the Scream Society podcast, hosted, written, produced, and edited by yours truly, Ralph Anthony. Help the society grow by subscribing on your favorite platform and leave a rating and review. I always strive for 5s. Have a horror or paranormal experience? Want me to answer your questions on the show? Submit to beacons.ai/The Scream Society. Connect with the podcast on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at Scream Society Podcast. And until next time, I'll scare you on the next episode.